Go down, Vanna. I'm going to do this in English for clarity and speed. So we've got our player sheet. You're going to get a player sheet. It's going to tell you the context, this kind of about what your character understands about the war. Then you're going to have objectives. In order to win the game, you need the most Vinnapoing. Your objectives are going to show you what to do to earn Vinnapoing. I've hidden these because it's important for the politicians that they're secret. So, for more advantage in negotiations. But it might say something like, you get 3 Vinnapoing if Schleswig is part of Germany at the end of the game, right? Okay, then it's got some reminders of things you can do on your turn. And I've got some suggestions here for bargaining chips you can use while you are suing for peace, which is part of your turn. So all the military players are going to be moving around the board, shooting each other and doing fun things. And you're also going to do really fun things. You're going to have to, if you're not the king or not Otto von Bismarck, you're in charge of the finances, okay? The king and Otto von Bismarck, they are writing messages to their countries to keep the people happy and keep them updated. But it's important for all players to understand kind of how this, how the finances work. So, pretty straightforward. We've got OM. This is our offently meaning. This is how happy the people are. So the people of the German Confederation or the people of Denmark. In this case, Denmark. So we're going to have a counter on here. At the start of the game, let's say we start on 5. So the people are pretty happy. They think the war is going well. Okay? Now, when we get beaten in battle and stuff, this will go down. When good things happen, when we win things, then it'll go up. Okay? Now, over here we've got our freed prisoners and our enemy prisoners. So every time our army beats someone on the battlefield, let's say they inflict 2,000 casualties to the enemy. After that battle's over, if our side won, we get half of those as prisoners. And now we can use them as bargaining chips. Because let's say the Germans have a couple, so this is 500 prisoners each. And we need 1,000 to heal the army. So let's say if the Germans have these, we can, hey, you know what? I'm going to pay you some money and I'll give you these prisoners if you give back mine. So then they go into our freed prisoners. And at the end of the round, we can spend. So remember, we need groups of 1,000. So each one is 500. So we could spend 2 to then heal the army. So the army would be like this, for example. No, sorry. The army would look like this. They'd have a bunch of damage on here. And so if we freed some prisoners or had some freed prisoners that could rejoin the fight, they would heal some. Okay? At the beginning of each round, you're going to calculate your income. It's really simple. You get income for every area where there is no enemy present. So here's the map real quick, right? If there is an enemy Austrian army in Föhn, we cannot collect money from Föhn. All right. So let's say there's enemy in Schleswig. That's pretty normal. So we'd get 100 from Scheelen, 75 from Föhn, 50 from Jülen. Okay? So that's 225 Riesdaler. That would go into the Staatskasse. So we'd indicate it with tokens. I've got tokens, but they're not here right now. With like 5s and 1s, whatever. Until we had 200 something. OM bonus refers to this. So if my population is happy enough, I'm going to make some extra money. After I've got money in the Staatskasse, I can either let it sit there for the round and then be done, or I can choose to spend it in places. I can give it to the army. So, for example, the army needs $100 per army to stay active. Otherwise, people are going to start deserting because they're not getting paid. I can give money to the Navy. It's 25 Riesdaler to repair 1 point of damage from a Navy ship. Or I can give it to the offently meaninger. So I'm paying money for public events and PR to make the people happier. So if they're way down here, I could give 25 of my monies to, at the end of the round, do this. So what you're going to do, you're going to allocate your funds. Let's say this. I'm going to leave some in there, and you're not going to touch it because this will go in effect at the end of the round. Okay, besides doing economy, the other part of your job is suing for peace. At the end of every round, we're going to try to get a peace deal going. Now, it's okay if a peace deal does not happen, but you do have to at least try. So here's some suggestions you could have. And let's say the Danes are in Fredericia. Let's say the Germans have taken Odense. Okay? So what we could do is either call for an actual end to the war and a big peace deal, which would make sense if it's going to benefit you points-wise. Like, let's say this is actually looking really good for us because we've held Fredericia, and I get lots of points if we hold Fredericia, so maybe we do want to find peace now. In most cases, it's probably not a good idea if the Germans are still in Danish territory. But even if you don't declare peace, you can still make arrangements. So, for example, you could say, okay, Germany, what if we give you 100 Riesdaler and you pull the troops out of Odense? You know, you could write that up, make that an agreement. Or you could do something like, okay, you know what? Let's end the war. Germany, you get to own Fyn if you let us keep Schleswig all the way down to the Eider. As discussed earlier, captured prisoners are also a good bargaining chip. And yeah, there are a bunch more ideas on your paper, but feel free to be creative. Remember, this is a role play, so this is high stakes. This is for the future of Denmark, the future of Prussia, the future of Austria we're talking about, okay? Godau Venner. Okay, I'm going to do this in English to keep it nice and short and clear. So you're going to get this player sheet here, and it's going to show you a bunch of things. Your context, that's the backstory. You want to read that. Your objectives. This is how you earn Vinnepoing. The person with the most Vinnepoing at the end of the game wins. So this tells you, for example, you get 2 Vinnepoing if the enemy has never stepped foot in Jylland. You know, so this is for the Danish player. You'd want to keep them out of Jylland. Here's a little guide to what you do on your turn. And then here's some things you should remember. Okay. På din tur, marchier din hær. Let me show you how you march your army. Alrighty. So first, you look at your little army stat card you're going to have. March value 2. That means you get to move 2 spaces. So if I have an army up here in Vila, I can simply go 1, 2. Easy. Or I could go 1, 2. Now, if I wanted to go over to Fyn, let's say I'm in Fredericia, I want to go to Fyn, but there's water in between. No worries. If the Danish Navy's there, I can go 1, 2. In theory, I can also stop my movement on a boat. I could go 1 like that and just stop it. So later on the Navy's turn, they could, sail around and then drop me off. On my next turn, I could go 1, 2. Okay? Now, if you're marching and you run into an enemy army, we got some Prussians here, what happens? So let's say I'm going to move my 2, I'm going to go with Fredericia, and then land here, and I'm sharing a space with the Prussians. That means we engage in battle. This is how that works. So both me and the Prussians have stat cards for our armies. This is the strength, the manpower, 20,000 men in this army. Their attack value, defense value, and then their march speed, which we already looked at. Then they've got morale. Okay, so in this scenario, I've got the Danes attacking the Prussians. They're on the offense. So the Danes are going to be rolling attack. So it's really easy. 3 just means you roll 3 dice. Their defense is 2. So they're going to be rolling 2 dice. All the dice are the same. Here we go. I roll 3. They roll 2. All right. If you're attacking, you count up swords. They rolled 3 swords. If you're defending, you count up shields. They rolled 1 shield. Shields cancel swords. So boom, 1 sword is canceled by that shield. These 2 swords go through. So that means the Prussian army loses 2,000 men because 2 swords came through. Additionally, they were trying to defend and they failed. Attacks came through. Because they failed to roll, they lose a morale as well. So that was the Danes attacking. Now it's the Prussians' option. Now the Prussians have an opportunity to make a decision. They can either withdraw, so they can say, okay, you beat us, we're done. And what that would do is, because enemy armies can't be in the same spot at the same time, they are forced backward. So that would be a withdraw. Or otherwise, they could stay and counterattack. So let's say they counterattack. Now they're on the offensive. So they got attack 3. The Danes have defense 2. We're going to roll in. Okay. So the Prussians roll 3 swords. The Danes roll 2 swords. Now they're defending. So swords don't mean anything because they want to roll shields. So that means 3 hits come in. The Danes lose 3,000 men in a massive counterattack. And because they failed the roll, so they lost in this matchup, they lose a morale. Now, if, for example, the Prussians had rolled 1 sword, like that, and the Danes had rolled defense, and they block all the attacks coming in, they would have been successful in that roll. So the Prussians would have suffered morale, even though they're not losing any men. They're not taking any damage, but they do lose morale because they lost the roll. Additionally, let's say the Prussians have a really horrible attack. They roll nothing, and the Danes roll 2 swords. The Danes are defending. Swords still don't mean anything. So that doesn't hurt them. It just means nothing happens. The attack was repelled, so no one dies, but they would lose a morale because it was a failure. Now, you can go back and forth, counterattacking, as long as you want. And any player, of course, when it's their turn, they can choose to break it off and withdraw. So if the Danes, they had a horrible counterattack happen, they could be like, oh, you know what? Never mind. We're done. And they go back to the previous spot because, right, we started up here in Vila. 1, 2. So we go, back 1, and that would be the end of our turn. Now, let's say we just keep slogging it out. The other way this engagement ends is if someone's morale runs out. So even if you're doing really well, you're inflicting tons of casualties on both sides. If your men are out of morale, as soon as this hits that number, so this is 3 for the Prussians, 5 for the Danes, your guys are going to retreat. They're just tired. They're done. They'd fall back. So that's movement. Okay, with the Huskelist, there's just a couple things. With the Huskelist, there are just a couple special rules to go over. So, let's say the Danes are in Fredericia, and they've got a fortification. If the Prussians attack them from here, they will be attacking over the fortification, over this boundary, over the fortification. That means the Danes will get +2 to their defense roll. So that means they will be, instead of rolling 2 defense, like it says on their card, they'd be rolling 3 or 4 defense. So that's very powerful. If the Prussians attack from Calling, see the fortification is on this border. So this border is open. So an attack from Calling would not be affected by the fort. Okay, another important thing to know is that in the game there are red roads that run through Denmark like this. Now it's important that when you end your turn, you are connected to one free road. So that means I've got this road coming from the north and a road from the south, giving me supplies. Now if the Prussians are standing here in this space, they're blocking the road. But I've still got one free road up here, so that's okay. I'd be in trouble, though, if the Austrians were on the other end of the road. That just means at the end of the round, I'm going to lose some men. Some men desert because there are not enough supplies. Additionally, let's say I'm in this scenario where my supplies are cut off. If the Danish Navy is here, and let's say there's a road that actually extends here, the Navy extends that road to me. So they just become another supply line. It's important to note that when your army takes damage, that just stays. As the war progresses, the politicians will increase the amount of prisoners you guys have taken. So in the casualties, when you lose 1,000 men, what's really happening is 1,000 men are being lost from the army, not necessarily killed. So the politicians on the enemy team are actually rounding up a bunch of prisoners, and they get to use them as a bargaining chip. So if your team negotiates to get the prisoners freed, you could, let's say, if you were missing 4, you could heal pretty much because the prisoners are released and they rejoin your army. It's also important to note that the politicians decide how much funding they're going to give the military. And if they don't give enough funding to your men, men will desert. Godavana. Okay, I'm going to do this in English so it can be concise and clear. You're going to get a player sheet. It's going to have your context on it. So that's the backstory for the war and stuff. That's important to read. You've got objectives. So in order to win the game, you have to have the most VP, vinnerpoint, at the end of the game. And these objectives show you how you earn them. For example, 3 VP per overlevende skib. So for every ship that survives the war, you get 3 points. Okay? Here's on your turn, some reminders of what to do, and then some special rules to remember. Okay, so the first thing on your turn is seil din flåde. Okay, so let me show you how that works. Now I'm the Danish Navy. I've got this little stat card, and my sailing value is 2. So that means I can move 2 spaces. You can see the water is broken up into these regions, these zones with the dotted lines. So if I started there, I can move 2. 1, 2. Pretty easy. 1, 2. I can move 1 if I wanted, but I can move up to 2, and I cannot move onto land. Makes sense. Okay. Now, what happens if I'm moving, but there is an enemy in the way? Well, we cannot share the same space. So if I move here 1, now we're going to be in combat. Okay, let me show you what combat is like. So here we've got the Danish stats and the Prussian stats. Okay, the Danes are the ones that are attacking here. So we're going to look at their attack value, which is 2. So I take 2 dice. Then we're going to look at the Prussian defense value, which is 1. Now you roll them. All right. So the attacker is looking for swords, and the defender is looking for shields. The attacker, in this case, rolled 1 sword, and the defender got 0 shields. So that means this 1 sword now does damage. So their squo, which is their hull, takes 1 hit. And because they lost this little die roll, they lose a morale. Otherwise, let's look at how else it could have ended. If they had rolled 1 shield and they rolled 1 sword, they would have blocked that sword. So that means they would not take the damage. And because the Danes failed the roll, they would lose the morale. Now at this point, the Prussians, now it goes to the Prussians. They have a decision to make. They can either withdraw, which looks like this. So you can't be in the same space at the same time. So they would be forced to move backward. Or they may wish to counterattack. So in this case, let's counterattack. So our attack value is 1. Their defense value is 1. So now we're going to roll off. Okay, so the Prussians attack for 1. The Danes block it. It doesn't go through, so that means that was a failed roll. They would lose 1 morale. Oops, and the Danes still have 1 missing. So you go back and forth doing counterattacks unless someone retreats. Either way, having combat will end the turn. So if they retreat, even if you had 1 move left, you're done because you fought. Alternatively, fighting stops if the ship is destroyed, clearly, or if all the morale goes away. So if they just if they keep trying to fight the Danes and it's just not working, eventually the men will lose morale and they will withdraw anyway. Now, what happens if I've got some more numbers here? Let's say I've got 2 Danish ships here and I've got 2 Prussian ships. You just multiply everything really easy. So I'm attacking. My attack value is 2, but I've got 2 ships. So I'm going to be rolling 4. The Prussians have a defense of 1, and there are 2 of them. So we're going to be rolling 2 dice. So this is devastating. In this case, the Danes rolled 4 swords, and the Prussians didn't block any of them. So that would mean 4 damage comes into the hull, and then, let's say this is a fresh battle, then they would lose 1 morale because they lost that roll off. Okay, let's say the Prussian player is saying, I'm done, I'm withdrawing. In this case, they would move their guys 1 back, and now they have to suffer the consequences. So the hull is only 3. So that means these 3 destroy a ship. And then the last ship has 1 damage remaining. Okay, if you had a turn where you didn't do any fighting, so let's say I started here and I just moved 1, and I didn't do any fighting, I can choose to attack the land instead. So here's the land. We've got the Prussians on the shore. We've got our Danish Navy. The Danes are going to bombard the Prussians. And it's really simple. There are no counterattacks involved in this. It's just a simple roll. So in this case, we've got the Prussian infantry now we're looking at. So the Danish ships are to attack. They've got 2 ships. So we're going to double that. And then the Prussians are going to roll 2 defense. And okay, that's 2 hits, 1 shield. So that means 1 hit goes through. Those cancel. And the Prussians take 1,000 guys of damage. And that's a bombardment. Note that you can create sort of a bridge for troopers. So like this army, for example, on their move could hop on you and move over like that. Additionally, they could end their turn on you. Boop. And then they're pretty much on the ship. And you could sail around wherever. And then on their next turn, they could disembark. Oops. Just by using their move. 1, 2. Additionally, the army always wants to be supplied by a red road. And so in a case where they can't access these roads, let's say there are enemies standing on both sides, your ship can extend another road. So then they can still get resources from this ship. Note that your ships remain damaged. They just remain damaged unless the politicians allocate some of the money towards ship repair. It costs them 25 Regler to repair 1 value from your scroll.